Now, as I said on Twitter, I saw the Joker movie yesterday. Now, there's a lot of things I want to get into for this. First thing is, why there were losers attacking me on Twitter for having seen it. Now, Nazis, very, very clear white nationalists, were attacking me for seeing it, saying, incel, incel. I'm not an incel. So I don't know what you're talking about there. I just assumed that you're stupid. And then so-called MLs were attacking me, saying, oh, it was just be this nerd that liked the movie. Let me tell you something about that movie. There was a very clear class-conscious message to it. It's interesting that so-called MLs were attacking something for being class-conscious. Or maybe they just didn't watch the movie and they're stupid and don't know what they're talking about because they don't like me personally. Probably something pretty good there. Should probably remove that whole ML from your profile if you're going to attack things that are class conscious. You can keep the part about calling yourself queer and listing your pronouns. You can do that. That's right up the liberal alley for you. Now, after having watched the movie, there is nothing in there about inceldom. There's nothing about it in any way, shape, or form. This is a complete fiction by people who didn't watch the movie. Now, one of the interesting things I did see was that Forbes and other elite publications, very heavily and unapologetically towards the capitalist class, they said, or particularly Forbes said, despite saying a lot, there's no clear message. Actually, there is a very clear message, and in fact, there's really no ambiguity about it. They spell it out pretty well. When you have a society in economic crisis creates desperate times. Desperate times create desperate people. And there is a building resentment towards the rich that ends up creating social unrest. One of those things being stark inequality. But apparently Forbes just missed that. I mean, that's the backdrop to the entire story, is a huge economic crisis in which there's rampant unemployment, high crime, and people are really suffering from a severe level of alienation from each other. That's the backdrop to the whole story. Now, again, I'm going to warn about a possible spoiler. That's not much of a spoiler because it doesn't happen that too far into the movie. The Joker is a guy who has severe mental illness, as should be really obvious, before any of the stuff happens. So the city cuts back on social services, and he loses the medications that he's supposed to take. They cut the mental health program, and then he ended up suffering as a result. Now, I don't think that's an angry white male thing. I think that's a society screwing over the most vulnerable people. I mean, I know that a lot of so-called Marxists or so-called leftists don't seem to think that white males can suffer from mental illness, and that when you cut when you cut funding to mental health programs or cutting the programs altogether, you're hurting everybody who has a mental illness that relies on those programs, even if they are white and male. I mean, you're supposed to be against that, beating up on a vulnerable section of the population, even if they are white. I mean, that's pretty, to use your own term, ableist. But let's get into the heart of the matter. Essentially, the Joker is the actual person who makes up the character, is someone who is mentally ill and vulnerable. And the society which has discarded much of the lower class And very much so people who suffer from mental illness, who tend to get it worse than regular people because, they're mentally ill. He eventually goes through a series of negative events which end up causing him to go into an even deeper depressed psychotic state, and then end up creating the person that he is. I mean, the lesson here is that maybe you shouldn't marginalize people with mental health and leave them to disintegrate. Now, believe it or not, the movie doesn't have anything to do with mass shootings carried out by white people, because mental illness affects everyone, regardless of race or sex. I mean, that really should be obvious, but for some reason, people are making this out to be like some kind of massive incel movie when that has nothing to do with it. It's very strange how a very clear class-conscious message can be completely buried under SJW garbage. Actually, that makes perfect sense. The SJW culture really does kind of talk about everything except class and tends to just ignore class altogether, and it's really disheartening to see other Marxists doing that. You're supposed to be Marxists, right? Class consciousness is supposed to be like the focal point of our entire ideology. But in the course of the movie, Wall Street guys, and they say Wall Street guys, even though in the movie, for some reason, Wall Street's in Gotham City. I don't know how that works. But they end up dying, and people are celebrating the killing of these rich people, the people who crashed the economy. There was a very huge tide of anti-rich sentiment in the public because of the economic crisis that people have been experiencing. And that eventually builds to a boiling point at a certain time in the movie and becomes very central to particular events. I don't want to spoil that much, but I think it's important to make that point. So I think that's pretty important. Now, I think that certainly does explain why so many critics are divided on it. Personally, I think Joaquin Phoenix's performance was absolutely fabulous. It was wonderful. That really does deserve an Oscar. It's that good. But I think the anti-rich sentiment is what has a lot of critics confused about what the movie's message is, as the aforementioned Forbes magazine, who suddenly just couldn't wrap their head around the anti-rich sentiment because whatever capitalist propaganda you want to throw out at this point to reinforce that. So that's why I think a lot of critics were confused about what it is. I saw no angry white male syndrome in there at all. If anything, it's angry mentally ill person who has their life destroyed. And then this is kind of what happens. It should be kind of obvious that if you leave people who are mentally ill without services they require and medications to take, they become worse. Like, they degrade and suffer more. And that can cause a social issue altogether. That's kind of one of the messages there, too. You really should do things to help the mentally ill. But because Joaquin Phoenix is white, because the Joker is white, that somehow it's like an angry incel movie. As I mentioned previously, mental illness comes in every color. There's no limit to who can and who can't be mentally ill. Now, a lot of the basis for this is the fact that the Joker is a clown and has clown imagery. Therefore, same thing as internet meme. I don't really have to tell you that's a ridiculous non sequitur, and that's something that exists only in your own mind. That the whole clown thing with the Joker has existed decades before the stupid meme has. In fact, I think maybe closer to half a century. maybe even longer. I don't know exactly when the Joker character appeared in the original DC Comics, but it's pretty much predates that. If you can watch this movie and not see the class-conscious message here, you're trying. You're trying not to see it. That's something entirely on you that you're deliberately obscuring for your SJW garbage. And as I said previously, well, what a surprise. The SJWs don't focus on class. They focus on all the oppressions except class. And class is the one that capitalism doesn't want to confront or help. They are perfectly happy to write laws to help all kinds of oppressions, except the class one. Because, you know, capitalism is a class-based system. But I think I've spoken enough about the phony leftists as it is. The movie, in my opinion, is very, very great. It's very, very good. And it does have the important message to it. Now, something that I wanted to point out was very, very interesting how even before the breakdown, the Joker, whose real name is Arthur, and they say that right at the beginning. That's not a spoiler. The clown makeup is very sharp and angular. Now this stands in contrast to how clown makeup is supposed to be. It's supposed to be very rounded. It's supposed to be very soft edges, very rounded, because the angular thing makes it look angry. Now the reason I know this is because a couple of years ago I saw a documentary on Gacy. You know, the serial killer, John Wayne Gacy. And one of the things that they noted about him was that in his clown persona, he had the very sharp, angular paint as well. And that's where I learned that fact about the shape of the clown paint thing from. And I noticed they did the same thing in this movie. Now, in another part of the movie, the Joker is doing a stand-up act. And the place where he does the stand-up comedy is called Pogo. And I thought that was also really interesting because John Wayne Gacy's clown persona was Pogo the Clown. So I'm wondering if maybe they did that. They kind of just slipped that in there as a thing or what have you, because it was a good choice in my opinion. So, but here's what I didn't like about the movie. You're not supposed to know who the Joker is. You're not supposed to know where he came from. That's kind of the whole point. That's why the Joker is Batman's arch nemesis. Batman, the world's greatest detective, is confronted with the world's greatest mystery, the identity of the Joker. That's the whole point. And you've completely eliminated that by making the movie. Yes, I know the movie is not canon. But if it was, there would be no ambiguity as to who the Joker is. It would be very plain and very obvious to anyone who had a television set who the Joker is. So that would be my only complaint along those lines, is the fact that it doesn't fit in with the canon of Batman, which it wasn't supposed to. But you get what I mean. On the whole, without giving away too many spoilers, because I don't want to ruin things, it's a fantastic movie that you should watch because it does have a very clear class-conscious message. Now, it's not a refined message, but the message is there because of all the social unrest towards that, towards police actions, brutality by police. Not like that would be a thing that we're dealing with right now. I mean, in the U.S., they are very much on the verge of a economic crisis. Police are brutalizing and murdering people, and the movie is kind of warning that there's going to be a massive upheaval if that continues. as evidenced by all of history. If you somehow missed all of that to just say evil white people or whatever, you're completely missing the point. So I really would suggest that people see the movie, however you choose to see it, whether you choose to go to the movies or download it or whatever. See the movie. It's very good. And ignore all this crap about it being about incels and angry white males, because that has nothing to do with the movie. There's nothing in there about that. The movie is literally about a guy who's severely mentally ill being driven over the edge by a society that abandons vulnerable people due to economic crisis that is caused by a rich elite. Not like that could happen in real life or something, right? So, go ahead, watch the movie. It's fantastic, and I will see you tomorrow with another regular news video. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.